It all started about 10 years ago. I was living in a small town in Ohio, and for the first time in a long while, I decided to drive out to see my family, who had moved to Arizona. I hadn't seen them in ages, and I figured a solo road trip would give me a chance to clear my head and catch up with the people I care about. I packed up my old sedan with snacks, a couple of bags, and some music for the road. I even made a playlist the night before, just to make the drive feel a little less lonely. The first day went by without a hitch. I took my time, stopping at little diners and gas stations along the way. There's something peaceful about driving long distances, just you and the open road. I remember thinking how nice it was to be on my own schedule, not having to answer to anyone for a few days. On the second day, somewhere in Missouri, things started to go sideways. I was driving down a stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever, surrounded by nothing but trees and fields. My car started making this strange, rattling noise. At first, I tried to ignore it, hoping it would go away on its own. But the sound only got worse, and the car began to shake a little. I pulled over onto the shoulder, hoping it was something simple. I got out and opened the hood, pretending like I knew what I was looking at. The truth is, I've never been much of a car person. I poked around for a few minutes, mostly just stalling for time. I didn't want to admit to myself that I was stuck in the middle of nowhere, with no real idea what to do next. Just as I was about to give up and call for help, a gray pickup truck pulled up behind me. The driver was a man, probably in his late 30s or early 40s, with sunburned skin and a beard that looked like it hadn't seen a razor in months. He walked over slowly, giving my car a once-over before glancing at me. He didn't really ask if I needed help. He just started looking under the hood, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I told him what had happened, and he nodded, saying he was a mechanic. He poked around for a bit, making small talk about the weather and the road. There was something about his calmness that put me a little at ease, even though I didn't know him at all. After a few minutes, he said he needed a special tool to fix the problem, something he didn't have with him. He mentioned that his friend, another mechanic, might be able to bring it over. He pulled out his phone, fiddled with it for a second, then told me the battery was dead. He asked if he could use my phone to make the call. Without thinking, I handed it over. I guess I just wanted to believe that someone was finally going to help me out. But as soon as he had my phone, everything changed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun, pointing it straight at me. He told me to sit down on the side of the road and not to do anything stupid. His voice was steady, like he'd done this before. I did exactly what he said. He went through my pockets, took my wallet, my backpack, and even made me unlock my phone, so he could take it with him. Then, without another word, he got into his truck and drove off, leaving me sitting there on the shoulder, staring at the empty road. For a while, I just sat there, trying to process what had happened. I felt angry, embarrassed, and scared all at once. I was in the middle of nowhere, with no phone, no money, and no idea what to do next. Eventually, I started walking down the road, hoping someone else would come by. After what felt like hours, another car finally stopped. This time, it was an older couple heading to visit their grandkids. They were kind enough to give me a ride to the nearest town, where I was able to call my family and let them know what had happened. With their help, I got my car towed to a local shop and managed to finish the trip to Arizona, though I was shaken up for the rest of the drive when I finally arrived. My family was relieved to see me, but the whole visit felt different. I spent most of my time on the phone canceling credit cards, changing passwords, and trying to get my life back in order. It was exhausting, but I thought that once I replaced everything, the worst would be over. I was wrong. A few months later, I started getting letters in the mail bills for things I hadn't bought, accounts I hadn't opened. Someone had used my information to open credit cards and rack up charges in places I'd never even been. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but the letters kept coming. I called the banks and credit bureaus, filed reports, and put alerts on my accounts. It felt like every day brought a new problem, more charges, more paperwork, more headaches. I even got a call from my health insurance company saying someone had used my name to get emergency care in another state. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. My identity had been stolen, and it was affecting every part of my life. I went to the police, but without a name or a license plate. I filed a formal report anyway, just to have a record of what had happened. I spent weeks trying to fix everything, calling companies, sending letters, and checking my credit report every day. One night, out of frustration, I started searching online marketplaces in the towns where the charges had shown up. I didn't really expect to find anything, but then I came across a listing for some power tools and electronics items that matched the purchases made with my stolen cards. Something about the listing caught my eye, so I messaged the seller. Pretending to be interested, we exchanged a few messages, and eventually the seller agreed to meet in a public place. I was nervous, but I decided to call the local police and tell them what I'd found. They remembered my case and agreed to be there when the meeting happened. The next day, I waited anxiously for news. After a while, the police called me back. They said the seller had shown up, seen the patrol cars, and tried to drive away. He ended up crashing his truck into a ditch, and when they questioned him, he admitted that the items weren't his. He said a friend had given them to him to sell. With his cooperation, the police were able to track down the other people involved. It turned out there was a small group targeting travelers on quiet highways, just like me. They'd been robbing people and using their information to commit fraud in several states. All three of them were eventually caught and arrested. It took a long time, but justice was served. I can't say I ever fully got over what happened, but I did learn a lot from the experience. That summer, I decided to take a solo trip up the coast, just me, my old guitar, and whatever place I could find to crash each night. I wasn't looking for anything fancy. After playing a small gig in a quiet town, I figured I'd stop somewhere before heading on to my next show. Driving late didn't sound appealing, so I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through rental listings. I found a cheap spot just outside a small city. The reviews seemed good, and the price was low, so I booked it. The host replied almost instantly, sending a bunch of cheerful messages. Maybe a little too cheerful, but I didn't think much of it when I arrived. The place was tucked away down a long gravel driveway, surrounded by brush and trees. It wasn't really a cabin, more like an old house with a fresh coat of paint. There was an old SUV parked out front and wind chimes hanging from the porch. Everything felt a little too quiet. I parked, stretched, and knocked on the door. The host answered right away. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing shorts and a tank top, and he smelled like he'd been working with paint or chemicals. He shook my hand for a bit too long and started asking a lot of questions: where I was headed, if I was traveling alone, if anyone knew I was staying there. I kept my answers short. All I wanted was a shower and some sleep. Inside, the house looked fine, not fancy, but clean enough. As we walked through the house, he kept locking doors behind us. I noticed every window had thick, dark curtains even in the kitchen. There was a security camera mounted above the fridge, pointing right into the middle of the room. Trying to keep things light, I asked if he was into security. He just grinned and said, "Out here, you never know who you can trust." I nodded, not wanting to push further. He stood in the doorway, watching as I put down my bag. Then he offered me a glass of wine, saying he had a bottle open in the kitchen. I told him maybe later, hoping he'd take the hint. Once he left, I locked the door and pushed a dresser in front of it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I started to drift off, I thought I heard footsteps or the floor creaking outside my room. Around 3 in the morning, I heard a soft knock, just 3 gentle taps. I stayed still and quiet. Whoever it was didn't come back. In the morning, the room was still dark because of the heavy curtains. I started packing up, ready to get out of there as fast as possible. But when I reached for my car keys, they were gone. I checked everywhere: my bag, my pockets, the nightstand, the floor. Nothing. Then I noticed a piece of paper had been slid under the door. It was a handwritten note. "Don't leave until we talk." My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. I opened the door slowly and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, but I could hear someone moving around in the kitchen. I tried to stay quiet as I made my way toward the front door, but when I got there, through a glass door the night before, he'd left some tools there. Maybe my keys were in there too. I slipped out through a side door into the backyard and circled around to the garage. Thankfully, it was unlocked. Inside, the place smelled like oil and dust. Tools hung neatly on the walls, and there were shelves full of plastic bins. I searched through a drawer labeled spare parts, and to my relief, found my keys. Just then, I heard the host's voice shouting from somewhere behind the house. He was yelling something about not wanting to make things difficult. I didn't wait to hear more. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and started the engine. Gravel flew as I sped down the driveway. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see that old SUV following me. Back on the road, I kept thinking about how easy it was for someone to use a popular app to set up something dangerous. Maybe the host had more planned than just a conversation. I didn't stop driving until I made it to a bigger city. As soon as I had cell service, I called the rental company and reported the listing. I also called the local sheriff, like it had never existed. When the officer followed up, he said the house was locked up and registered to someone overseas. He told me I was lucky to have left when I did. Maybe it was luck, or maybe it was just listening to that uneasy feeling in my gut. A few years back, my partner and I set out on a road trip to visit the towering redwoods of Northern California. Instead of camping in the park, we booked a small, quiet hotel in a nearby town just a cozy place to rest after long days of hiking and exploring. We were both looking forward to a peaceful escape, a break from our usual routines. One evening, after a full day wandering through the forest trails and snapping photos, we were driving back to our hotel. The sun had set, and the road was almost empty, just the occasional car passing by. As we made our way down a winding stretch, something odd caught my eye in the headlights. What looked like a person lying on the side of the road, feet pointed toward the street. I nudged my partner and said, "Did you see that? I think there's someone lying there." At first, she was skeptical, suggesting maybe it was just a bag or some debris. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a person. We debated about it for the rest of the drive, my certainty growing with every mile. By the time we reached the hotel, she could tell I wasn't going to let it go. She asked if I wanted to go back and check, and I said yes, absolutely. We turned the car around and headed back. The road felt even quieter the second time. When we reached the spot, sure enough, there was someone lying there. My partner pulled over and rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" she called out. No answer. She tried again, louder this time. Suddenly, a woman dressed in dark clothes sat up. She wore a warm brown jacket, black pants, and had a purse with her, along with a few water bottles. Her makeup was neat, and she seemed gentle, but there was something fragile about her. We were both surprised. She looked to be in her late 40s. I asked where she was headed, and she said she was trying to get to a gas station a few miles up the road. Her mother was supposed to meet her there. The thing was, the gas station was still a long way off, definitely not walking distance, especially at night. We offered her a ride, and she quietly climbed into the back seat. As we drove, we tried to keep the conversation light, asking simple questions. She told us she'd gotten tired from walking and just needed to rest. It was winter, and she didn't have a hat or gloves. She looked exhausted and cold when we arrived at the gas station, which was closed for the night. She thanked us and sat down on a bench outside. We offered to wait with her until her mom arrived, but she insisted she'd be fine. I reminded her there was no cell service in the area, and checked again if she wanted us to stay. She said no, so we drove back to our hotel, both of us feeling uneasy. Back at the hotel, we noticed 2 police cars parked in the lot cars that hadn't been there earlier. I turned to my partner and said, "I bet they're here because of that woman." I walked over to one of the officers and asked if they were looking for someone. The officer said they were searching for a missing woman and asked if I'd seen her. I explained what happened and told him where we'd left her. He thanked us for helping and said it was a good thing she got away. I asked if they could check on her at the gas station to make sure she was safe and that her mom had arrived. The officer promised they would. Curious and concerned, I later checked the local police reports. That's when I learned there had been a domestic violence incident. At our hotel that night, the woman had been badly hurt and was so desperate to escape that she'd left in the dark, without a flashlight or warm clothes, just to get away. She'd gone to the front desk to call her mom, but her husband knew she'd be there, so the staff called the police while she slipped out. From what I understood, her husband was arrested that night. I often wonder what happened to her afterward. I hope she never went back to him, and that the police checked on her and her mom really did come to pick her up. That night has stayed with me ever since. It's a reminder that sometimes people are going through things we can't even imagine. And a small act of kindness, a ride, a question, a bit of concern can make a real difference. It also taught me to trust my instincts, even when others doubt what I see.